Welcome to In Conversation. I'm your host, Steve Iverson. Today our guest is Marianne Stewart, who is a Lexington resident who's running for the 15th Middlesex District State Representative seat that's being vacated by Jay Kaufman due to his retirement. We're going to hear what Marianne would like to accomplish in that role and what separates her from the other candidates and a bunch of other things as well. So thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You bet. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, especially as it applies to the job that you would like to have?
Sure. I came up through the site council and the PTA over at Harrington School.
Yeah.
And then I was elected to 2 terms on the school committee and served as chair during the recession.
Okay.
And then Governor Patrick appointed me to the State Board of Education.
Mm-hmm.
I've also been a community activist for more than 20 years, pounding the pavement for workers' rights, better revenue, LGBTQ equality. And after that, the Raise Up Massachusetts Coalition asked me to lead on better funding for public education and public transportation. So my husband and I have lived in Lexington for the past 24 years. Duncan, my husband, was born and raised in Lexington, and he still had deep roots here. So when we moved in 24 years ago, we came in through the affordable housing program at LexHab and lived at Emerson Gardens for 5 years and then bought the house that we live in now, which is over in East Lexington near the Arlington Reservoir.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm over in East Lexington as well, but on the other side of Mass Ave, up behind Wilson Farm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you have children?
We have 3 children, now young adults.
Okay.
We have a going to be 28-year-old son who lives in Somerville and works in Boston. We have a 25-year-old son who lives in Denver and works he's a research assistant at Colorado University in Denver. And then we have a daughter who will be 21 in February who's in a vocational education program. She has special needs, and so she hopes to graduate. She will graduate in the spring and then has plans to go to Middlesex Community College.
Mm-hmm. Has that affected your own perspective on special needs programs and the way they provide services to people?
Oh, sure. I think learning to navigate a complex system of services for our daughter has been, challenging and rewarding also. But it takes a while to understand the language that's used and really figure out how to best advocate for her needs with the system, and so that everybody is on the same page and that we're all working in the same direction to really help her move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was it essentially a helpful experience, or was it also, I think you're also saying that it was also difficult at times to make things happen the way they should?
It's been very helpful for her. I'm glad
Okay.
she's had services because that's been really critical to her success, to her development.
Yeah.
Yeah, necessary.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And this is the question that everybody gets asked. Why are you running, and why do you want this job?
Serving as our next state representative is an opportunity for me to expand my call to service and to extend my leadership on the critical issues that we face in the 15th Middlesex and across the Commonwealth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been boldly represented by Jay Kaufman for the past 24 years, and the issues that that we faced and the things that the causes that he's stood up for are still in front of us, and we're still going to need someone with a progressive voice and a courageous champion who's going to lead in the State House, who's going to stand up to leadership and advocate for change.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Have you met Jay?
Oh yes, many. Of course, I'd say we moved into town right about the time he was running for
24
state
years.
rep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And our children were pretty little at the time, and then once our youngest entered school, I realized I hadn't met him, so I called him. And I had been to a national conference and had learned a lot of things about education funding. This was right after No Child Left Behind had been implemented. And I asked Jay if he could meet with me and then explain to me how the state funds public education. And I didn't know it at the time, but I have come to learn since, Jay was one of probably half a dozen people who could really explain that. And so we met for coffee early in the morning, and I still have the little doodle that he drew to show me how the state funds education through the Chapter 70 program, the foundation formula, and how each community, participates in that formula, and then how the state does also. So that was the beginning of really checking in with him. And then after doing that, I ran for town meeting and received a lovely note from Jay congratulating me on that. And then I asked if I could volunteer in his office that summer. That would have been 2006. And so that summer I volunteered in Jay's office, just doing odds and ends and just kind of seeing how things were done. And then he recommended me for the Citizens Legislative Seminar, which was, I don't know if it still is, but it was a 6-week program once a week at the State House for about 4 hours. And it culminated with a mock Senate session in the Senate chamber with the Senate president. And at that time it was Robert Travellini. And so when I did this was October through November of 2006. So I was there. The sessions were held on Wednesdays from like 9 to 1. And so this was the day after the November election when Governor Deval Patrick was elected the governor. He was governor-elect, and there was a real energy and real electricity in the State House that day. A lot of excitement. And then it was also the week that Therese Murray was elected the first woman Senate president. So there was a lot going on. It was a really interesting time to see that. We met with various legislators, House leaders, and Senate personnel, Senate leaders, and really got to hear from them about their campaigns, some about the issues that they were advocating for, things like that. So it was a very hands-on experience, and I really enjoyed the mock Senate session. They limited the number of people participating in the program to 40 so that you could each have a chair in the Senate chamber. And that was a very fulfilling opportunity and really interesting time. So, yeah.
That got you that much more warmed up to the idea of being in politics?
Absolutely. And at the time, I was really, I was PTA president at Harrington, and what really drew me to that work was the opportunity for building community. It was really, that's the thing that I liked most about it. I think in the years before I became president, I had been asked many times to take on a leadership role there, and I felt like it was you had to be a really good fundraiser. You had to be able to raise a lot of funds for the school. And then I realized after attending some conferences that no, the PTA is not the fundraising arm for the Department of Education.
True.
It is the largest advocacy group for children in the country. And so that did give me a sense of things, and I continued to pursue the advocacy component and work on policy for many years, for all those years. And then I ran for school committee in 2008. And
So what was that like, being on the school committee in a town where the schools are so valued and so important?
Well, I started on the school committee right as we began the Great Recession. So it was a very challenging time, but working with my colleagues on the school committee, we were able to protect programs. We didn't have to cut any programs, and we didn't lay off any staff either. And we did that because we kept our focus on the needs of children and classrooms. And I served as chair during the recession, and actually serving on the school committee taught me the value of earnest questions and a soft heart. People care very deeply about their schools. We're very close to the community on that level, the school committee level, with families and students. Myself, I had children in the system at the time, so it was very, you were very, very close to the community and the issues that were affecting them.
Yeah, people care very much about the schools.
They do.
Pretty much everywhere. But we especially, we've done a nice job with the schools here in Lexington. They're always highly rated. I think people really put that very high on their priorities.
Well, citizens are deeply supportive of our schools. I think there's also a concern for all of the programs that the town is responsible for. And we've been very responsible, the town has been, and I think another credit to the system is the fact that we have a very stable community of educators. Once they come into the district, they're usually here for quite some years and build their own communities of educators and rely on each other for support and to help reach every student. And also the families who are in the schools are so connected to really helping their child succeed. So even before they get into school, parents are reading to their children, they're taking them on lots of extending their learning through extracurricular activities and trips and travel and things like that. And certainly that continues through the years as well. So those things in combination, I think, really help to secure the strength of the school system here.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were elected, you would represent not only Lexington, but parts of Woburn. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine the Woburn school system would be of concern to you as well.
Of course,
yeah. I'm just, how do they compare, the Woburn school system and the Lexington school system?
Well, Woburn has a very diverse student body. They're not quite as large, the system isn't quite as large as Lexington's, but they're going through the same, many similar things that we're doing in terms of capital projects, building new schools, reconfiguring some schools. Woburn is fortunate to have a large rainy day fund, so they have good funding for their programs and for education. And they're very committed to education. So when I knew I was going to run for the seat, I contacted everybody that I could on the mayor and the school committee and the city council, and to let them know that I was running for the seat and that I would welcome any opportunities to meet and discuss any things that they'd like to. And certainly, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I would continue building those relationships. Sure. And improving all aspects of community in concert with they're also looking for going to be electing a new representative on the other parts of Woburn, the other 5 wards. So it will be an opportunity to work together with the new state rep for the district over on the other side of Woburn, as well as with our state senator, Cindy Friedman.
Mm-hmm. And you're a Democrat, of course.
Yes.
Would you call yourself a progressive? And as these things go, would you say that you're sort of a centrist Democrat, or more to the left, more to the right? Or those are very vague terms, but I think you know what I mean.
I've been a lifelong Democrat, and our state house is full of has a supermajority of Democrats.
Yeah.
And many Democrats there have been there a long time, and very many corporate Democrats. So a lot of them campaign as Democrats, but govern as Republicans ultimately.
Okay.
So as a progressive Democrat, I've been giving voice to progressive values for many years for equality for all, for fairness, for opportunity. We're the party of inclusion in general, the Democratic Party. And so really advocating for change that in particular helps the most marginalized among us, really helps everybody rise. So those are the values that I have been committed to, and it's the reason why I've received so many endorsements from progressive organizations across the state, Progressive Massachusetts, Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, Mass Alliance, which is a coalition of progressive organizations across the Commonwealth, including unions and LGBTQ groups, women's groups, pro-choice healthcare, environmental groups. They all say that I will be the progressive choice in this race.
Okay. And what kinds of things would you say distinguish you from the other Democratic candidates who are running now?
Well, certainly the years that I have spent pounding the pavement on important issues, workers' rights, better revenue, LGBTQ equality, these are the issues that really matter in our environment today and across the Commonwealth. And so I bring an activist spirit. I would bring that to the State House. In addition to my experience at the local level and at the state level, I've been on numerous boards and committees and working groups and task forces over the years, and also worked with Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts to study our revenue options, and which is critical at this time. We really need to take a big look at everything that we can to bring revenue into the state.
Yeah, the so-called millionaires tax didn't pass. What were your thoughts about that?
Well, I think if we're going to talk about taxes, we have to understand two critical things. One, our taxes are inadequate, and two, they're unfair. And the millionaires tax, I was actually one of 10 original signers to initiate the tax, the ballot initiative going forward to amend our state constitution, which was going to take 4 years to do at a minimum.
Well, it would have required amending the Constitution.
Right,
I missed that somehow. Okay.
Yes, and which is why it required. It started as so this was a citizens initiative, and it began with citizens getting signatures and then forwarding those to the legislature, and then the legislature handing it off to the legislature for back-to-back constitutional conventions. So it started in 2015 with the signatures. 2016 and 2017 were the back-to-back years for the legislative, for the Constitutional Convention, which required a 25% support of the legislature, and it received over 70% of support from the legislature. So that was tremendous, and that is a credit to Jay and his leadership in the State House. And then we were supposed to be able to put it in the hands of voters in November to make the final decision to approve the tax, which, as you probably heard, did have broad support.
Yeah.
And the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, knocked it out of the hands of voters for November. So what that means is, and then they did it, it was on a technicality that's primarily has to do with the fact that it started as a citizens initiative. Going forward, we will need to refile the legislation as a legislative initiative, and under that condition, the same technicality doesn't apply, but the same process, it remains. So it starts in the legislature, you still have back-to-back constitutional conventions, and it will still take a minimum of 4 years before it comes to voters. In the meantime, we still have critical needs for, this was money that was going to be raised, revenue for public education and public transportation. We still, those needs haven't gone away. We still have critical needs, and we can talk a little further about that if you'd like. But what this initiative would have taxed millionaires, anybody making over $1 million, the million and one would be charged 4%. Additionally. And at that level, those who are the wealthiest among us would pay more of their fair share in taxes, but it still wouldn't bring them up to what the rest of us pay. So, but it was an improvement, and I do believe that we should be taxing the wealthiest among us more, so that we are paying more of our fair share. People are already feeling overtaxed. So we really need to take some critical steps to look at how we're going to find that funding. And the Tax Fairness Commission that Jay was chair of several years back came up with it was a bipartisan commission, and they came up with, 15 or so recommendations. And among them was to institute a more progressive tax system. Another is to do a full audit of the tax expenditure budget, and that has not been done. These recommendations came out in 2014, I think, or 15, I guess, and they haven't done this audit. We need to do that. We also need to take a critical look at payments in lieu of taxes, which are currently voluntary, but we need to really look critically at nonprofits making a lot of money, probably. I don't know what the number is, maybe five. I don't know what the number is actually, but we need to make some decisions about mandating that payment from some nonprofits.
And that includes big universities,
Sure.
places like that.
Yep, private and private partnerships there, or private institutions and nonprofits. And I think once we get a handle on some of that, we should also be looking at closing corporate tax loopholes. We right now don't have a way to understand the tax giveaways that we provide to corporations. We don't know how accountable, there's no accountability for how much we're getting in exchange for the corporate tax giveaways. And so I think that is a worthy exercise, particularly at this juncture. And also looking at the decriminalization of marijuana, we can make some decisions about that once we get that off the ground and start seeing some revenue coming in from that as well. So all of this is coming into play, and also we just saw a surplus in the state, but in revenues this year of about $1 billion, a little over $1 billion, and some decisions were made about how to use that. It's hard to tell at this point if that's going to be a recurring revenue stream, if we're going to continue to have $1 billion every year, and if we are, then we absolutely need to incorporate that into our budget for public education, public transportation, all of our public structures, parks and recreation, libraries, etc. I think that as we go forward, these are the challenges that we're really facing. The revenue issue is something that you have to understand. About 20 years ago, some decisions were made by state Republican administrations to reduce our revenues by $3 to $4 billion every year, and the state has never recovered. So we've gone from we always start being in a hole when we're building the state budget. We're $3 to $3.5 to $3.8 billion in the hole every year as we begin to build the budget, and we're coming up from that point. Under Governor Baker, we've gone from one austerity budget to another, and we really need to have more of a sense of will to fund the things that we can fund and really prioritize some of these things. So those are some of the issues that I'm deeply committed to going forward if I'm elected to the State House.
How do you think Governor Baker has done, and especially in the context of your own values and what you would like to work towards? What would you say about his performance?
I think he's not done a very good job. I think the governor has, he came in saying he was going to be this great manager and everything, and he hasn't even managed very well. There are so many ways that he's fallen down on this aspect. I couldn't recount them all, but I would direct folks to the Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts website, progressivedemsofmass.org. They've put together a document called the Baker Dossier, which looks at all of the critical pieces of our government and in the ways that he has not met the charge to do the job. And so while I have not taken a public position on any of the governor candidates, gubernatorial candidates, we have two very good candidates, and I would really love to see one of them get elected as our next governor, and that is very, very possible. That we absolutely need to work for that. We can do it.
Yeah, he's a Republican, but in some ways, I guess, since he's in Massachusetts, he's governed a bit more as a Democrat than he might have in some other states that are by nature more Republican.
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think he's very clearly a Republican and has supported many of the Republican agenda. So
Okay.
when you just look at the Safe Communities Act, for example, we know about the tearing apart of families that's happening at our southern border
Right.
of the country, but there's a lot that's happening here in Massachusetts. The aggressive deportation and detainment agenda of the Trump administration is being played out here in Massachusetts. Lexington passed a resolution to protect the immigrants in our community and the undocumented and any refugees, but they are still being separated from families for lengths of time. And in fact, the Regional Office for Homeland Security and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, is right around the corner from us in Burlington. And I was there with some people from Woburn and surrounding communities in February to protest their aggressive agenda, and met a gentleman who had been separated from his family for a month, not for no criminal charges. There were some civil issues, but nothing criminal that truly required him being separated from his family. But he had been released the night before, and then we met him that morning and had a little protest outside the Homeland Security building there. And I think it's without getting into just it's appalling what's happening nationally, but it's equally as disturbing here in the state. And the governor wasn't going to support the Safe Communities Act, even though vast majority of legislators supported it, and it was the right thing to do. Morally, it was the right thing to be doing, and it just completely got left out of, even as a budget amendment for the FY19 budget. So, and it wasn't even the first time this bill had come forward. The Safe Communities Act has been an opportunity for the legislature to take action for many years, 6 years, I believe. So, and they had yet to do it. The House leadership, this is another example, House leadership just didn't want to have the debate in the House, to let legislators have the debate. We should be having debates. Certainly the representatives who represent their communities across the Commonwealth deserve to debate the issues. If we come up short and the votes fail, then we live to fight another day. But if it passes, then that is progress for our communities and for our Commonwealth. And we absolutely don't have that kind of support in the leadership, whether that's the governor or the Speaker of the House.
Okay. I'm afraid we only have a couple of minutes left. I'm amazed at how quickly this time has gone by.
Yeah.
But is there anything you'd like to make sure you mention before we stop? And I include that, including that things like you might want to mention your website and
Sure.
things like that.
Sure. I invite voters to check out my website, mariannestewart.org. I'm also on Facebook at Marianne 4 rep, so look for Marianne Stewart for state representative. I'm on Twitter at MAStewartMA and Instagram at MAStewartMA, and I would love to have people catch up with me there. I usually post various links to articles and reports and things like that, and try to stay on top of things on the website with the blog and statements from various decisions that are happening right now as a result of the budget process. So it would be an honor to serve as our next state representative, and I humbly ask for your vote on Tuesday, September 4th. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. Got a nice sense of your passion about social issues in particular. And I wish you the very best of luck.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
You bet. It's been In Conversation. We've been speaking with Mary Ann Stewart, and thanks for watching.